How are you guys? Welcome back to Wargaming China, my free channel where I platform my understandings of the War of Resistance against Japanese aggression in China from 1931 to 1945. And as you know, I do this mainly for wargamers, and I do this mainly for the means of showcasing the wargames that I have and my armies and the things that I've built. And today we are at the town of Yangquan in Shanxi province at the edge of the northern plains. This is part of the larger Battle of Taiyuan, which is the final battles of the northern plains. It's October 1937, and elements of Sun Jiang's 22nd Army Group, a Sichuan provincial army of the Sichuan Clique, is defending the town of Yangquan against the Japanese Northern China area army. Now, if we looked up the Battle of Taiyuan, and we would see that Yan Zhaishan is Supreme Commander, the model governor. And if we looked at the orders of battle, we will not see, you will not find the 22nd Army Group. Now, why is this? Well, nobody wanted the 22nd Army Group. Even though China, the fighting is ongoing and casualties are heavy, Sun Jian's 22nd Army Group finds itself fighting here without being on the order of battle. Now, why is this? By September 1937, Chiang had called on China's warlords to fight the Japanese, and the warlords came forth. They didn't let China down, and they began marching their armies to face the Japanese invaders. Among the many warlord armies that marched to China's defense was the Sichuan Cliques, and the 22nd Army Group, commanded by Lieutenant General Sun Jian. It consisted of the 41st Corps and the 45th Corps, although some references will say that it consisted of the 42nd Corps. It consisted of two divisions, the 122nd. The 41st Corps was commanded by Major General Ming Jiang. It consisted of two divisions, the 122nd and the 124th. The 45th Corps was commanded by Lieutenant General Deng Zaihu and consisted of the 125th and the 127th Infantry Divisions. Upon mobilization, the 122nd Army Group began marching towards Shanxi, to the Shanxi Henan region. It was under the idea that it was going to go serve with Yan Zhaishan's forces around Taiyuan. Now, when it began its march, as a medieval army. There's only the supplies on the men's backs, and there's not much of a supply train, not much supplies at all. Sichuan is a very poor province. This army is a very poor army in terms of equipment and arms. And indeed, the entire army only had 4 clapped out 75mm field guns for support for the entire group army. But as I said, upon mobilization, it marched north to the Shanxi Henan region, and that's a 1400 kilometer march, and it took them just over 50 days. It had no supplies, so as I said, it had no supplies that it already carried, and the only supplies would have been a couple of ox cart wagons loaded up with a a meagre regimental train of ammunition, and an even smaller whatever an army needs. The 22nd Army Group did not have. So it had to sustain itself on its 400-kilometer arch by living off the land, which for a Chinese army, it's a medieval fashion. You pillage and robbing villages as you go. Eventually, it did get to Shanxi. But if General Sun had expected some supplies to be provided during the 1400-kilometer march, he was sadly mistaken. And now, when he gets to Shanxi, to the Shanxi Henan region, he had expected to become part of Yan Zishan's second war zone. However, the model governor, as chairman of Shanxi province and commander of the second war zone, did not want these troops under his command. These troops were despised. They were viewed as opium addicts, the scum of the earth. They weren't even considered $2 soldiers. There was no fighting them. There was never considered to be any fighting them. Yan Zishan wouldn't have had a lot of supplies, and he certainly didn't want to put the 22nd Army Group, the Sichuan Clique, onto his order of battle and start supplying it. Now, he did say to the commander of the first war zone, Chen Qian, who was chairman of the Henan province as well as head of the first war zone, he asked him if he wanted them, and he had the same view of them as Yan Zishan did. He wanted nothing to do with them. They were considered the scum of the earth. They were so badly equipped, badly led, and so addled by drugs that nobody wanted them under his command. However, Sun Jin had marched the distance, even though both generals both war zone commanders had refused to have his army join their forces. He was given orders to march 140 kilometers east and defend the town of Yangquan. Now this order, see, I interpret this order as really Yan Zishan is just trying to get rid of the 22nd Army Group, so he puts it in a hopeless position. The town, advancing on the town of Yangquan, as I said, is a northern area, North China area army, Japan's North China area army, and they're vast. They're well equipped. Nothing stopped them yet, and having received no supplies, and not even any maps of the area, he had to blunder his way here. He had to march 140 cliques to Yangquan with no maps. He had no maps of the region. He knew very little about the topography of the surrounding area beyond what he could see. So he set up his defenses, and the men of the 22nd Army Group then managed to hold Yangquan for 10 days. Of 10 days of Japanese bombardment with artillery, the odd airstrike, tear gas, and banzai charges. At the end of the 10 days, the 22nd Army Group was forced to retreat. Now, it's winter. It's October. It's winter. The crops have long been picked, so this year is the long crops wouldn't have existed, just for me to make the battlefield crop pretty. All the fields would have just been stubble, very little cover, and the approaches to this, although I have hills on here, I wouldn't want you to think that they are big hills. It's still the central. It's still the northern plains. After you get past Yangquan and take Taiwan, then you have the northern plains totally in your control. Now, I am going to skip into conjecture here and wonder how the hell Sun Jian managed to keep his army together. I mean, for the 1,400-kilometer march to join Yan Zishan's forces with very little supplies and none given by the government or sent by the government, received from the government, what did keep his men together? And I can only assume it's opium. Sun must have been a good commander, and this is conjecture. I'm not scorning, because you do what you have with you do what you can with what you have. And if you think about how a couple of sacks of opium wouldn't have been too much trouble, even for his limited supply network to function with, we can only assume that the march made the long 1,400-kilometer march made the 22nd Army into a coherent unit. I mean, if we look at the Red Army and their long march, that's what turned the Red Army into a solid unit. It changed the Red Army. Perhaps this 1,400-kilometer march that Sun Jian embarks on to the front with very little supplies, maybe this bonds his men. But for the fighting at Yangquan, we can Sichuan casualties were heavy, very, very heavy, and there was much fighting with swords and bayonets and grenades, because bullets were in short supply for the Chinese troops. The town at the time wasn't a very big town, about 20,000 people. Sorry, about 10,000 people, but now it's a major city, and the walls are now the center of the town. And as I said, it's winter. They've had no supplies, so the men are in summer uniform. Most of them are barefoot or in sandals if they're lucky. So to hold here for 10 days in the cold, freezing under enemy fire, I can only assume that there was at least plenty of opium. And, I'm not knocking the men, because, I've never fought addiction or anything like that, but as I said, Sun Jian had to do what he had to get what he could, in any means he could, from his men. And I'm sure if he hadn't had opium, his army would have soon deserted. So what happened to them after the fall of Yangquan? Well, he retreated back to Yan Shan's lines and met up with Yan Shan's army. But again, Yan Zishan refused to issue supplies to them. Now, this is an army, as I said, that's now been in the field since September. And it's now at the end of October. It's had no supplies at all. So what happens next was probably predictable, but it still shouldn't have happened. The 22nd Army Group attacks and seized one of Yan Zishan's supply depots, and they helped themselves. I mean, they would have been starving by this time, but that was an unforgivable act. So Yan Zishan banished them from Shanxi province, expelled them. They headed to Henan, but Chen Qian again refused to supply them with anything, and they were expelled from Henan province. It was only Lai Zonggren of the fifth war zone that said, "Well, they're better than nothing. I'll take them." So then they began their march to the fifth war zone to partake in the battles around Zhuzhou and Taiyuan. Now, we're going to follow this division, the 122nd Army Group, because I thought, with so many channels dedicating their channels to the finest soldiers there ever were, or videos to the greatest the most elite forces. So we're going to have a couple of games where the Chinese forces will be, well, they are what they were considered to be, the Sichuan troops, the scum of China. And I'll amend a few rules and modify a few rules to facilitate that, as well as the opium. And I'll show you now the forces for the game. Now I'm going to be playing the game using rapid fire rules, but I will amend them heavily. Now this is the forces I'll be using for the Sichuan Clique, and it's a regiment, 4 companies to a regiment. Support weapon is one mortar, 1 medium machine gun, 1 13.2mm autocannon, and a 75mm Krupp mountain gun, 1903 mountain gun. Now I'm going to restrict ammunition. I'll roll the dice to see how many rifles they have, and facing them will be 2 battalions of Japanese infantry, but they will be reinforced by an extra artillery battery, an independent machine gun company, and an independent mortar company. Seen most of the figures before, airfix figures, and mainly Eshi figures, mainly Eshi. So that's the forces for the game. The 122nd Army will be expected to hold the town, and I think 12 turns I'll try to go for. Japanese will have some air power, airstrikes, and it should be a good game, but interesting because it's the first time I'm going to use some. I'm going to have to think of the modifiers I'm going to get. I've made a table to spur me on with the rule modifications, so it may be a while before I play this game, but there we are. It's another video on an obscure unit. Listen, I don't have a production schedule. I don't have production standards even. So if you don't want to miss anything, it's best to subscribe. I'll be exploring more of the 122nd Army Group in battles to come, and those battles will take us to Taiyuan. Alright, hope you enjoyed that. Hope you press subscribe or press like. See ya.